What's going on? Nick Tello here. Today I'm going to break down the production of my song Chaos into Cash. I do not know what to call this song. It's like pop punk mixed with trap, mixed with pop trap. And there's like a hyper pop, also like alternate ego that I have to it. So like basically I'm just going to start from the beginning with the vocals. So let me just play the song just so you can hear it a little bit. I'll start right before the verse.
Trash and house the next play. Corporate craze, get the fuck away. More to life than the lunch you paid. Sworn into a mission built on dumb luck. No one's due to listen till you come up. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Throw a right hooks till the episode back. I'm never not exhausted, but I won't waste my time. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Bury our losses with the other set backside. I'm nervous, but I'm in too deep to resign.
So that should give you an idea of how the arrangement actually goes. So as you can see, it has these electronic drum samples mixed with guitars, mixed with 808's, mixed with vocals. So I'll start with the vocals because the vocals are kind of like, where I built a lot of, the vocals are where a lot of the song's energy comes from. So basically, to start, I should talk about my arrangement process. So my arrangement process is what I do. I start with a guitar riff. I write this guitar riff right here. Let me see. Yeah, so basically what I do is I take that guitar riff. Sometimes I write the top line on the piano. A lot of times top line doesn't need to be that complicated for this. It's literally just like 3 notes for the most part. It's like, do, re, mi, literally like, mi, re, re, mi, do, do. You know what I mean? This literally just like the best top lines a lot of times are literally just like a couple notes. So I wrote that on the piano and then I recorded that to start. And then, the chorus is kind of similar. But the first tip I want to make is that a lot of these, you can beef up your vocals by adding a low octave. So check out the main.
Yeah, paid the fees, gave the keys, shut it all down and arrange a speech. Here's to getting gas too fast with no brakes. Throw her in the trash and hash the next play. Corporate craze, get the fuck away. More to life than the lunch you paid. Sworn into a mission built on dumb luck. No one's due to listen till you come up. Yeah, turn the...
Yeah, so as you can see, what I do is I record just the whole thing through. Like I'll record, all the lows and all the highs and all the harmonies. And basically what I do, I throw it all in the session. You can see I muted the parts that I didn't want for certain parts. Like the high vocal is consistent throughout. But the low vocal, you can only hear on certain parts where I chose to have the low vocal as like an in and out. So like for here, for example.
Yeah, paid the fees, gave the keys, shut it all down and arrange a speech. Here's to getting gas.
You got to pick and choose like which parts kind of like emphasize the, the line by just adding a low vocal in there. Because when you have it just the whole way through, there's not as much like movement to it. Here's the verse with the low vocals in the whole time.
Yeah, paid the fees, gave the keys, shut it all down and arrange a speech. Here's to getting gas too fast with no brakes. Throw her in the trash and hash the next play.
Yeah, so you got to be kind of selective about like where you put all your backups and where you kind of like choose to layer in, because you could layer in as much as you want, but you got to have a little bit of like push and pull, which is why I kind of like choose to like have it, just on like select lines basically. Same thing with the chorus. I'll hear the chorus just so you can hear how I arranged the vocals.
Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Throw right hooks till the episode back. I'm never not exhausted, but I won't waste my time. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Bury our losses with the others at backside. I'm nervous, but I'm in too deep to resign.
So yeah, the vocals are a little bit more filled out there because I was able to get away with more, because choruses are typically thicker arrangements, so it kind of makes sense. This right here, the orange. So if you look at it, like I have the harmonies kind of like littered in. I have them in a little bit less than the lows actually, but if you listen, they're kind of like an added layer on top.
Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Throw right hooks till the episode back. I'm never not exhausted, but I won't waste my time. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Bury our losses with the others at backside. I'm nervous.
So yeah, they're a little added layer on top. So the way that you kind of write harmonies, here's the thing. Like, it helps to know music theory. I will say, like, having a background in music theory, like I, took music theory classes in high school and in college. Having that background in music theory helped me a lot. But more important, I think, than like being able to like structure out harmonies on staff paper is ear training. So being able to like understand like what kind of like notes sound good in a harmony. So like, for example, let me show you what I chose for my harmonies here. So if I just solo the main box and the harmonies, it'll sound like this.
I'm never not exhausted, but I won't waste my time. Yeah.
And then here's what it sounds like with the mains.
I'm never not exhausted, but I won't waste my time. Yeah.
So one way that you could do this is you could actually set up a keyboard on top of your vocal. This is a hack that I usually teach to my students as far as like, you know, trying to write a harmony underneath like a vocal or on top of a vocal. So what you can do, let me see, I just add a track. It could be anything, literally. I think I usually choose just like a piano, like literally just a piano, but let me choose Serum just because I know like a preset that will sound good with this. This is usually what I tell people to do when they're trying to write harmonies is you don't necessarily want to just like wing it, because that's how you end up with harmonies where you have like, you know, seconds that are clashing with each other or harmonies that aren't quite fitting together, especially in the context of a chord progression. So what I do is I'll pick a synth, like whatever it may be, even like a piano, maybe it sounds something like this. And then basically just like play along to it and try to figure out what the melody should be. And a quick tip, like you want to work with like thirds. I do a lot of like, you know, fourths, fifths, a lot of like, you know, root note especially. And if you're not familiar with this, then you'll definitely have to kind of brush up on like what the different like scale degrees are. That's how I think in terms of is like, is it the fifth of the chord? Is it like, you know, the root note of the chord, or like, you know, what note is it in relation to the melody? So for this, for example, the main melody is, it's literally just like, if you think about it in terms of solfege, it's like sol, 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 mi, re, do. And when you think about it in terms of like, okay, what would be a good harmony to go along with this? I think, because when you play them together, actually, those are fifths. No, they're fourths, actually. So here's the trick, is I wrote it down in the MIDI, so it sounds like this. You can hear that that's what the harmony is supposed to be like, but I mean, obviously, like if you're still even earlier in the process, what you should do is write out the main melody, and then when you listen to it with the main melody and the harmony that you wrote underneath, just in solo, it sounds like this. So you can tell that it really fits there. So what you can do is you can obviously like, you know, mute this. And what I recommend people do who are just kind of starting out with harmonizing is have this playing in the background in your headphones while you are singing it. That way you know that you're actually hitting the notes. And I guarantee 75% chance more that you'll hit it. So that's my advice for like, you know, writing harmonies, especially if you're first starting out. So now I want to talk about some of this production stuff. So obviously the vocal is pretty auto-tuned and it sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, it really did a big favor to me because like I said, I recorded this song kind of out of my range. So what I have here is I have the vocal just running through auto-tune on a pretty fast setting, but it doesn't even sound that auto-tuned because it's not like all the way to 0. So here's obviously like the most obvious place where it sounds super auto-tuned because I kind of did want that sound just a little bit, you know. So here's with no auto-tune.
Throw her in the trash and hatch the next play.
Like, I honestly don't think I actually tuned that hard because I knew I was going to run it into the auto-tune, but here's with the auto-tune on like a half speed.
Throw her in the trash and hatch the next play.
Like, it's not even that bad, but when you bring it up all the way to like 5, it sounds just really tight.
Throw her in the trash and hatch the next play.
But if I did it all the way to 0, it would sound a little bit too tight.
Throw her in the trash and hatch the next play.
And then it's like, oh, okay, he went for the auto-tune sounds. And I didn't really want that. Like, I wanted it to be auto-tune, but not all the way. So that's why I picked a retune speed of 5 for this. So a couple of cool production things that I did. So the first one being the fact that I have this little bridge section here and I automated the foreman shifter. There are a lot of effects in this song, so I'm just going to focus on a few. But one of the main ones is this bridge section. I have a little altar boy on here, and basically what I did... What I did is I automated the foreman shifter up and down. So I talked about this a little bit in the Isotope Hyperpop video, but basically like you can formant shift stuff, and that's how you get that kind of like hyperpop sound. Either you get like kind of like a deeper sounding vocal or a more like chipmunky sounding vocal. So what I do is I kind of like, you know, automated that. So let me show you. I use Little Altar Boy for this, and I just basically just tweaked the parameters so that it goes up and down like over time. So you're gonna want to look at the formant section. Yeah, and that's how I did it. And another thing that I did is I cut off the very beginning of this to get the like, yeah, like at the I do this throughout the song. It's one of my favorite things is to actually like have a filter. So another thing that I'm doing here is I have a filter that is automating the cutoff so that it's, you know, it's driving it and it's distorting it. Yeah, so check it out. I'm automating the cutoff on this filter to get the like yes to like open up over time. A filter is essentially just an EQ that you kind of like open up on the cutoff, and it opens up those high frequencies, which is why it starts kind of like, you know, high pass, like it cuts all the high frequencies out and it starts kind of muffled. Then over time it opens up. So this is what it looks like. Yeah, you can see the cutoff gets like brought up over time. So I just want to talk about the outro vocals because this is a lot of vocals happening in the outro. So this is what the outro sounds like.
Yeah, turn the chaos into cash, throw a right hook, steal the episode, black eye. I'm never not exhausted, but I'll always my time. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash, bury our losses with the other setback side. I'm nervous.
So yeah, you get the idea. So it is a lot of vocals. Let me play just the vocals just so you can hear what just the vocals sound like. And I just want to break it down because like, you know, I know a lot of people that are following my content really like my like way of like, you know, vocal layering, because I'm kind of a G at vocal layering, you know, not to like, you know, toot my own horn, but it's fucking true. Like I know how to layer vocals. So this is what the vocals sound like all together, and I'll break down what's actually happening.
Yeah, turn the chaos into cash, throw a right hook, steal the episode, black eye. I'm never not exhausted, but I'll always my time. Yeah, turn the chaos.
Yeah, so you get the idea. So basically what I have, I'll just stack them just over time. So I got my main vocal here.
Yeah,
But there's a couple.
throw a right hook, steal the episode, black eye.
So these are my main vocals. I usually have like 2 takes and just, you know, have 2 kind of like takes in the same timbre. If you're working with aggressive takes, a lot of times like it helps if you're working with 2 aggressive takes versus having like one that's aggressive and one that's like kind of not, because like yes, it's good to have contrast, but if they're the same volume and they're kind of both in the center and they're both trying to take the spotlight, they'll compete with each other, and it's like almost like they almost like don't want to get along. It's like the equivalent to like phasiness with vocals when you're having like 2 main vocals, but one of them is raspy and one of them is not. So if you're layering vocals that are kind of like both supposed to be playing the center field or whatever, they should be pretty similar, to be honest. So those are my main vocals, and then let's add the lows in. Got some hook softs. Turn the chaos into cash. Throw a right hook, steal the episode, back eye. So there's like 4 lows here just on this part. So here's the other side of that when you're layering vocals is like you can have like for your low vocals especially, you can have like a softer version of the lows and then like an aggressive version or where you're like I'm never not exhausted, and then you have one that's like I'm never not exhausted. That's going to help because you're going to have one that's like a little bit whispery, adding a little bit more top end because of the breathiness, and then one of them that's going to hold down the body of the mid-range. So that's one thing that I've discovered helps a lot when you're layering is to have 2 different timbre. For your background vocals, you can mess around with the timbre and like how you're delivering these because it's going to help to have that variation. But when you're working with your center vocals, try to keep them relatively the same. All right, so then aside from that, I got my harmonies. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash, throw right hooks. And then, all right, so the homie Valid Point sent a fuck ton of vocals. So literally his stuff is just a stack on top of my stuff. Here are his highs added on. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash, throw right hooks till the episode. And then he sent high harmonies. He's a fucking beast, yo. He sings high, and he can nail those high takes too. So like his harmonies are wild. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash, throw right hooks till the episode back eye. I'm never not exhausted, but I won't. And then he even sent like a low vocal to add on top of it. So it's like, it's beefy. It's got the top end now to it too. And then he even sent like an octave down, like a double octave down. So let me just actually solo just that, because just so you can hear it.
Yeah, turn the chaos into cash, throw right hooks till the episode back high.
Yeah, like that's added on top of everything else. So we have so many, we have like at least 3 octaves at this point. We have multiple harmonies. We have the lows on both sides. We have everything. And then on top of that, I actually have a counter melody happening that originated in the guitar. So if you hear the guitar, it sounds like this. So this actually this was one of the first melodies in the whole song. I was originally going to have this be the chorus, but I decided to have it be like a counter melody. So I recorded a counter melody with entirely different lyrics. I blended it pretty low into the mix because, to be honest, it's not that important, but it did add a little bit of an extra like, ooh, what's that in the background of it. So check out what this sounds like. I'm going to actually solo all those parts so you can hear them.
I don't expect the world to know my name. I just want peace of mind to hold my flame. I fought to reap a life that keeps me paid. The rest is just dead weight.
So the thing with this stuff, what I always tell people if they're trying to do these like counter melody things, and I think Blink-182 and like Feeling This was like a big inspiration for me, is you want to kind of use these to fill in spaces in between. I mean, I will admit both of them are pretty busy. This one's a little bit less busy than the chorus. The chorus is fast. It's like, yeah, turn that to chaos and a catch. You know what I mean? It's like very, very, very fast. And this is a lot slower, a lot more laid back.
But I've come too far, can't digress. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Throw right hooks till the episode back high. I'm never not exhausted, but I won't waste my time. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Bury our losses with the other step backside. I'm nervous, but I'm in too deep to resign. Yeah, turn the chaos into cash. Throw right hooks.
So it's not so much that it actually like fills in the spaces, but it adds rhythmic contrast. So like if you think about it in terms of like, you know, whole notes and half notes and quarter notes and things like that, like it adds more contrast when some of the notes are being held out, for example.
Turn the chaos into cash. Throw right hooks till the episode back high.
Like when I say back I is like a quarter note into a half note or whatever, and then that's when the other vocal is doing eighth notes. So it's kind of like a little bit of like a syncopated thing that's happening in the background. I don't know if that's syncopation actually, but it's basically just another rhythm happening in the background vocally. But I have it blended down, really down into the mix. No one's gonna understand those lyrics, I bet, but at the same time, like it goes with the guitar and it kind of fits. So I just rock with it. And yeah, those are the outro vocals. So another thing that I want to talk about is basically I have a telephone filter happening a lot throughout this song, and the telephone filter is a huge part of just the arrangement in general. So like when you hear the intro, I am playing the game of like, you know, trying to get people's attention immediately. So I was just gonna have guitars in the beginning, but I obviously opted to have like this in the beginning.
Yeah, pay the fees, gave the keys, shut it all down and arrange a speech.
Yeah, so a big part of this sound is basically just the filter that I have automated on in the beginning, and it's very simple. It's a filter, and then I have some distortion on it as well. So with these telephone filters, like, don't trust the default setting, because the default setting will sound like poop if you just leave it alone. It's gonna sound really ringy. This is typically what I do. Like, I'll do like a band pass, and then I'll also like lower some annoying frequencies because it just sits better in the mix. So this is how I'm getting the telephone filter sound at the beginning.
Yeah, pay the fees, gave the keys, shut it all down and arrange a speech.
Here's without the filter.
Yeah, pay the fees, gave the keys, shut it all down and arrange a speech.
So you can really hear the difference. I think one of them is going through a different output or something with a different filter, but yeah, you get the idea. The telephone filters are huge in this song. And then there's a lot of other like vocal stuff that I'm doing. I already went over the chopping and stuff, but there's also ad-libs. There's also like, you know, I form and shifted the yeah in like this section, for example. That's literally just a low. That's literally just the same vocal with a form and shift down added on top.
Luck, no one's due to listen till you come up. Yeah, turn the chaos into.
Yeah, so for the 808 in this song, I'm using 808 Warfare and I'm putting it with a kick drum. I know a lot of people talk about like don't use kicks. I don't know where that came from, honestly. There are a lot of 808s that have a lot of attack to them, but I found that like, you know, kick drums just add the attack that you need. Like I don't understand the point of like phasing out kick drums when you have a banging 808 because you can just add even more punch to your, you know, to your kick. You can just add more punch to your 808, I mean. So this is just the kick in the 808 alone. So if you look at the 808, it's pretty crunchy. It's got some distortion to it. I'm obviously mixing it to have a lot of like, you know, distortion. I'm using just Manny overdrive directly on it. And then if you look at it, what I like to do is I like to put an EQ on at the end of like my 808 my whole 808 thing. And when I look at it, I see that it's like, you know, it's pretty nice. It's got all the like low frequencies. Your 808 has to have those like sub frequencies. It's got to have the like, you know, mid bass frequencies, and it's got to have some stuff in the top end if you're trying to have that like distorted 808 sound. But when I listened to my mix and I actually compared it to a different song, so my reference track is Mood by 24K Golden. So, you know, when I listened to that song and I compared their bass to my bass, what I noticed is that my bass didn't have a lot of this like 100 hertz like mid-range. So here's the thing that I did. I added an octave on top of my 808 and I just EQ'd it so that it literally, this is the EQ that I put on it. So it sounds like this. So yeah, this is the EQ I put on it. And you may be thinking, what is this EQ? I've never seen an EQ like this before. And the point of this is to have a bass that is strictly in the frequency range of the notes that I'm playing, in between like that 70 hertz to like, you know, almost 200 hertz range. So I'm just going to solo just that actually, just so you can hear it. And you might hear that by itself and you might be like, what is the point of that? It's kind of like resonant sounding and just weird. But listen, when you listen to this in the context of the whole mix, I noticed my mix was lacking in this sort of like 100 hertz bass range. And I realized that if I add an octave on top of this, listen to these two together now. And here's without the bass octave up. Then I'm going to add it. The bass just sounds a little bit more filled out. Now I'm going to do it in the context of the whole mix. So here's without it. And now here's with it. It adds to it. I don't know if you heard a difference or not, but I for sure did. So that's a trick that I do to fill out my mid-range in, you know, using the bass. So real quick, I just want to talk about the snare. So I'm pretty proud of this snare. What I did is I layered two snares on top of each other. If you know anything about my workflow, you know I'm huge on layering samples together. So I have this snare kind of just in the center, and then I have this snare. It's more spread out, and then I have this on the offbeat. And, you know, the trick with the, you know, how I do this, you know, we're all a fan of the offbeat snare thing that everyone does. You know, what I do that I like to do is these are like 64th notes, I believe. Yeah, they're literally 64th notes, and then they're like, so that's really it. That's all it is. So that's how I layered my snares and got that sort of like, it's like in the center, and it's spread out. And then it's got the little like, like on the, to the left or whatever. And then the hi-hats. So I'm also very proud of the hi-hats. As you know, like I do the same thing with my hi-hats where I kind of like layer a bunch of samples on top of each other. But my whole thing is creating grooves within the hi-hats. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll come up with this whole pattern, and then I'll basically, this is the pattern on 10. Like, this is it with all the elements that I decided to add. And then here I have, so basically this is the same sample, just turned down. Like if I open up battery real quick, you'll see this one is -4, this one is -2, this one is 0. So you can see I have them go from the 0 to the -2 to the -4, and I have them like kind of panned. So they do that like brr, like thing, but they're also like panned. Yeah, so what I do is I come up with this ridiculous hi-hat pattern, and then I basically, for the verse, I take out some of that stuff so it's a little bit more simplified. And then when the chorus comes, it's all hands on deck. Yeah, and then when you hear it, like when you hear the drums just by themselves, like they have so much groove to them because of these ridiculous hi-hat patterns. Yeah. But let me just talk about the guitars real quick. So just so you know, the guitars are, you know, in the chorus, for example, I have these chords, plus the leads that I already mentioned. And then on top of that, I have these quantized. Tell me that's not an A1 guitar trap beat. I think my favorite thing is that I do these, the palm muted guitars with the delay. So just so you know, really all that is, it's just a root and a fifth. Like, I'm a huge fan of just root, fifth, everything. It just adds literally root, fifth stuff, like when you do like, you know, the 1 scale degree and the 5 scale degree over and over. It's not really a melody like it is, but it's not. You're just adding essentially like the equivalent to like a rhythmic drone note. That's kind of how I look at it. So that's palm muted on the left, root fifth. Another take on the right, and these are quantized, mind you. And then a harmony in the center. And then here's what it sounds like with all that stuff and the drums. Add some guitar chords in. Add the guitar lead. That's like a whole song right there, you know? Yeah, and then I'm filtering it here and there, and then I also have a bass happening. Just to add a little bit more mid-range. Some of these aren't even in tune. It's so funny. And then I also have several sections where the guitars just get filtered just for a fraction of a second. Like here, for example, I have just these guitars. I have them filtered just for a second there. The thing is, like, I think I have these filtered throughout the whole thing because it's important to, like, when you have so many elements, you only need so much top end from so many of them and so much low end from so many, so and so much mid range from others. So you just kind of got to be selective with how you're, you know, how you're filling out the frequency range. Which leads me to my next point. Filling out the mid-range is something that you do more so in production than you do in the mix. Like mixing, you can only add so much mid-range in. A lot of the reason why your mix may not sound good in the car is because of the fact that you don't have enough things in the mid-range, or your mid-range isn't right, or it's not consistent. And, you know, a lot of times we tend to scoop our mid-range because we think mid-range is muddy. But in reality, mid-range is a huge part of what makes up a mix and what makes a mix sound amazing. If you listen to like a lot of these songs that that are on the radio, for example, they're all so nice and filled out in the mid-range, and that's what makes a huge difference in your cars. So a lot of, you know, people think, oh, that's something that you fix in mixing, you just boost the mid-range, and that's not true. Like, you want to be thinking more in terms of like, how can I get the most out of my arrangement to make it have mid-range? So a lot of, you know, what I do is I fill out the mid-range with different elements. Let me show you a few that I do aside from the guitars, because that's an obvious one. Like, I have a couple of pads here to just fill out the mid-range nicely, you know, in the verse and the chorus. So that's the first one. Here's the next one. So these two together. And then another thing that I do is I just add lead elements sometimes. Like here's a square, a tacky square thing. Yeah. Normally I wouldn't go on adding leads as late in the mix as I added that thing, but honestly, like it's so attacky that it's in and out of the mix, like in terms of like it's kind of a transient, so like it's in and out so quickly that it doesn't clutter the mix up too much, you know. And then here's another thing that I added, just a like a square wave thing. I'm actually a huge fan of this sound right here. So when you hear all my synths together, so yeah, when you look at all these synths and how they're kind of in the mix. So yeah, when you look at the mid-range and all these things combined, this is a very important frequency range. That like, you know, that like 140, 120 even up to like 300, like that stuff needs to be there. It's got to be there. And so like when I added these little synths in addition to the guitars, in addition to the 808, in addition to the 808 100 hertz thing that I added, it's just adding that stuff into the mix. And you got to fill out your mid-range. That's it. That's the moral of the story. So that is it for the production of this song. I had a blast making this song. I feel like it's definitely been me going more in the direction of like the kind of music I want to make, which is impossible to define with words. You know, it's like pop punk mixed with like trap pop. I don't know. I really don't. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the mix breakdown next. Peace.